Chapter 6. Marriage Life. There's no need for that. He threw his blanket down. I'll sleep on the couch, you sleep on the bed. He considered himself a gentleman, and it was only proper to decline. Lisa could fall asleep anywhere. But James, who lived in such a large mansion, was not a person who could cope with inconvenience. It's okay. I will sleep on the couch. For real. I am used to doing it at home. Sleeping on the couch would be uncomfortable for someone your height, she said. She stood at his side, ready to pull his elbow. But before she could touch him, he stopped her with his elbow. Lisa dropped to the ground and looked up at James, who had completely dismissed her good intentions. She offered him the bed since she wanted to get along with him, but a small contact offended him. Her fury began to rise slowly. Lisa stepped up and yelled, "James, are you crazy? Forget that I came to sleep on the couch for charity. What do you mean by this?" James raised his perfect brows, lowered his head, and patted the area on his elbow where she had touched. He looked calmly at the distraught woman beside him and said, "Let me get one thing clear. You are responsible for all that has happened. You are implying that you are being kind. Don't you think it's a little late? Even if I had drugged you, I did not force you to shove me down. You could have rubbed me off by yourself, but instead you pushed me down. I should be the one who complains." She felt even more ashamed when she said this, but she refused to admit it openly. It was his fault for being a jerk. James had no idea what rubbed me off meant, but once he did, he found it revolting that a lady could be that disrespectful. Another coating of ice appeared to settle on his face, and he pointed, his slender finger at the door. "Get out!" Lisa hesitated, having no idea what she was thinking as she quickly argued with him in this manner. The more he looked down at her, the angrier she became. She jumped on his back while staring at him. "Oh no, there is a rat. It's quite scary. Rats are my biggest fear." Because he detested her, she intended to irritate him even more by adhering to him. James tensed up. When her soft, fragrant body clung to him like a sloth, his body jolted, and he instinctively tried to shrug her off. "Let go." He moved his arm backward to push her away, but the two soft lumps pressing against his spine ignited a fire inside him. His body froze. Lisa was quite tall at 168 but she was significantly shorter than James, who was at least 190 centimeters. Her physique was unlike a man's. It was as soft as silk and as flexible as water. She clung to his body like a little serpent, making him realize that despite her height, she was extremely slender. Her pale fingers clung to his arm, reassuring despite being cold to the touch. However, at this point, the lumps pressing against his back were larger and more visible, and his body began to heat up uncontrollably. Damn that. The medicine's effects should have worn off by now. However, his body was clearly reacting. "I will not let go. There is a rat. I'm afraid of rats." She clung to him for dear life and refused to let go. However, she felt his arm reach out and grab her waist. He pulled her off his back and threw her down. She grabbed him with her momentum and slid to the ground. When James regained consciousness, his gaze was drawn to her soft pink lips. He also noticed a slice of gleaming white teeth. It was like a passionate appeal that made his throat dry. Surprised, James reflexively pushed away from the delicate figure that had fallen on top of him. Lisa felt a sharp pain in the softest region of her chest where his arm had jabbed her. It ached so much that she was in tears. James had just begun to relax when he noticed Lisa sitting on the floor, hands on her chest and tears streaming down her porcelain cheeks. Strangely, his heart lurched in his chest as he looked at her quivering shoulders. He regained his rationality and began reprimanding himself after becoming rather frustrated. He had truly gone insane. She was only a girl in her early 20s, but she was forced to accept this marriage without love. After all, they were both at blame. She wasn't the only person to blame. Her sobbing had him at a complete loss. He didn't know how to comfort them and could only stand there. "I apologize. This time it wasn't your fault. I was too emotional. To be honest, I'm just like you. I haven't become used to having a woman alongside me. I didn't shove you because I dislike you, actually. I have an illness that doesn't enable me to touch women." His explanation was unexpected. She raised her wet eyes in surprise and uncertainty. He thought to himself, since they had to live together, he should tell her about his disease. Letting out a breath, he replied, "I'm fine with men, but all women make me feel uncomfortable. It's not only that I can't touch them. I will even acquire rashes, vomit repeatedly, and my blood will run backward. That is why I avoided you." Lisa did not comprehend. Such an illness exists? Is it a psychiatric condition? James sat there with his back straight as a ramrod as always. He looked perfectly healthy. His eyes were as peaceful as water in a well. He was used to this. After all, he had seen countless doctors for 30 years. He only had to keep it a secret from outsiders. It's both. He rubbed his temples with his softly curled fingertips. He seemed a little fatigued. You must keep this a secret from outsiders. I'm telling you only because we'll be living together. I hope you know that my family wants us to be married as they think you may reduce my illness since I touched you. So this was the truth. It was a pity that they were misinformed. In actual fact, Lisa could not heal his sickness. She recognized that what had happened between them was due of the things she had done. Lisa nodded her head in humiliation. Of course, it's not your fault that you're ill. Sorry, I touched you because I didn't know about it. I promise I won't touch you again. He gazed at Lisa doubtfully. She stuck up 3 fingers, her fingertips soft and lovely. Her eyes was focused on his as she smiled at him forcibly. James looked away from her and whispered quietly, "Okay, let's go to bed then." Lisa nodded her head vigorously. She massaged her hurting chest and stood up. "I'll sleep on the couch. No need." James laid down on the couch. Putting aside her shame, Lisa didn't dare to touch him again. She found a blanket and dived under it. After turning off the lights, the room was plunged into darkness. Their breaths mingled into the air and circulated gently. The couch was not comfy, so he kept shifting and rearranging his body. He could clearly hear someone tossing and turning on the bed. His forehead furrowed with anguish. He could tell that she was sleeping soundly, but her sleeping posture was incredibly unpleasant. He simply could not get used to having a woman, especially one that he had slept with, share the same room with him. As so, he stood up and walked out. Chapter 7. Madam Sarah, you do not need to be frugal. The next day, Sarah opened her eyes to unusual surroundings. It took her a few minutes to understand that she was now married, but where was her husband? She jumped off the bed. Everything on the couch had been returned to its rightful location, but the person on it was nowhere to be found. Sarah departed the room and proceeded to the dining area. The maid bowed to her from the side. "Madam, I'll lead you to the dining room." The instant she came, she found James bathed in sunlight. She walked over with delicate footsteps. His emotionless look immediately decreased the temperature across the dining area by a few degrees. His well-defined form appeared even more upright in a suit. Without clothes, his form appeared muscular, only to appear leaner with clothes on. His face, which could make any woman heave a sigh, and his mysterious, dignified gaze made Sarah's brow lift slightly at just a short glance. "Hi. Good morning." She walked over to greet him. However, James simply raised his eyebrows and examined her once over. The casual outfit she was wearing had been provided by the staff. They complemented and highlighted her shape. James buried his head in solitude. With his skeletal fingers, he groped for the white ceramic coffee cup on the table. He did not raise his head again. How frigid and remote. Sarah pouted and sat down. Throughout the lunch, they did not interact at all. When they left, the maid looked at Sarah's sorrowful expression and declared urgently, "Madam, Sir is not a bad person. Sometimes he's just grumpy in the morning, especially if he didn't get a good night's rest." Sarah asked, "He didn't sleep well last night?" The maid answered, "Yes. Sir woke up in the middle of the night and went to the study room to sleep, so he didn't sleep well." Sarah opened her mouth slightly in surprise and was at a loss for words. She came to a realization after thinking about it. He had been obligated to marry her because of the disaster. Understandably, he probably felt nervous, especially when he loved another lady. It was unlikely he felt happy sleeping with her in the same room. Sighing, she thought to herself, James is also pitiable. He's an exceptionally lucky person, yet he's suffering with such a strange illness. Putting it this way, it was because she had carelessly mistaken him for someone else that he lost the lady he loved and had to marry her instead. She suddenly felt as if she had divided a couple of lovebirds and began to blame herself. Sarah packed up and prepared to travel to the company. On her way out, she observed a throng of persons moving out noisily. When she examined more attentively, she observed James instructing them. His height and lean appearance made her think of a crane standing amid chickens. His well-made pants wrapped over his lengthy legs, which produced tremendous strides that were exceedingly smooth and lovely. His stroll decreased some of the aloofness in his eyes, although his stiff stance carried a subtle indifference. An atmosphere of calm authority could be naturally felt. He unhurriedly strolled through the double doors and seemed like he was preparing to go. Sarah hurried after him in a hurry. "Wait for me, wait for me." James's harsh countenance changed upon hearing her chatter. His eyebrows knitted together. He turned his head to see Sarah wearing a flattering dress pinched at the waist. She was running towards him like a madman. His brow furrowed even more. However, her wavy black hair emphasized her white complexion so that it seemed like snow. It made her appear cleaner and tidier. He sucked in a big breath, switched his eyes away, and continued moving out. "Take me along, James. I'm heading to the company." "I'll get someone to send you there," he stated curtly, while looking straight ahead. "Oh. Okay. You may just bring me to the bus terminal. There's no need to spend a car on me." James frowned. The Carter family is not so poor that their madam has to save money on transport by taking the public bus. His attention stayed on her face, and after some contemplation, he said, "Get in." Hearing this, Sarah immediately hobbled after James, hoping to save $2. James's automobile was huge. It was not the automobile that they had taken yesterday. Inside, the seats were made of leather and had a fresh fragrance to them. James looked down at the tracks that her shoes had made and growled, "Why are your shoes so dirty?" Sarah looked down and observed an unsightly footprint. She chuckled in shame and replied, "I don't have shoes." Seeing James's beautiful eyebrows curl again, she pinched her lips and muttered, "What are you dissatisfied about? It's not like I wanted it to happen. These are my only pair of shoes." James glanced at her. She was clothed messily, and her slender, long legs could be scarcely seen. He inspected her clothes. It was the same set of clothing that she had worn yesterday, and she looked painfully shabby. He said, "I'll take you to buy some clothes first." Hearing this, Sarah cried out, "My clothes are fine. It's simply that I didn't bring them over. When there's a chance, I'll go back, grab my possessions, and bring them over." But James had already told the driver, "Find a place where we can buy clothes for the madam." The driver instantly executed a U-turn. Sarah was humiliated. "It's really not necessary. It will be too annoying for you." James skimmed his gaze over her clothing. He did not know where she had bought the clothing. It had been washed so many times that it was obviously antique. She had probably worn it countless times. "Your clothes are too dirty. I feel uncomfortable just looking at them." "Fine then. Since it makes him comfortable, he can buy whatever he wants." To think that she had felt he was being courteous. This is called being frugal. What do you know? You're used to treating shabbiness as thriftiness, but that's not a habit of mine. His eyes were, as usual, disinterested. Sarah said, "Yes, of course. It's nice to be rich. You can change your clothing every day. I don't have many, therefore I wear each piece of gear for a lengthy period. How many times do you imagine I've worn this piece? It costs several hundred when. Of course, I won't throw it away until I've worn it out." James stared at Sarah. The Carter family shouldn't be that poor. Sarah grinned while glancing at him. "So, you investigated me pretty thoroughly." "Naturally? You think I would carelessly marry a woman without investigating her?" Sarah fiddled with her sleeves. "But didn't you just find out that I'm an illegitimate daughter of the Carter family? My father never treated me like a part of the Carter family. As a child, I lived with the nanny. It was only when he saw that I had grown up and had value that he offered me a room. When I was younger, my outfits were always hand-me-downs from Olivia and Hannah. Even if the garments had been washed repeatedly or even damaged, they were still good clothes. I would constantly beg the nanny to mend them for me and continue wearing them." James's eyebrows twitched. As he looked at her, his gaze began to rest. Soon, the two of them arrived at a known fashion boutique. The moment they got in, James swept his eye across the store and murmured to the salesperson behind them, "Give me all the clothes in her size." Seeing how decisive James was, the salesperson's eyes began to light up. He rapidly brought Sarah farther inside. Sarah was a little dumbstruck. This was the first time she was experiencing how the rich went shopping. Chapter 8. This chance encounter is flustering Lisa slid out of her dress and into a lovely skirt. It draped across her torso and instantly brightened up her appearance tremendously. Inside, Lisa tried each component one by one. The salesperson eagerly supported her with a superb attitude. To the side, James sat nicely on a chair, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. Although Lisa had gracefully declined, it was apparent that she had never seen such a spectacle, until they came. She strolled around the store, looking at everything with a constant wide-eyed astonishment. It surely seemed as if she had never worn good clothes. However, when he raised his head, Lisa came before him in a jade green gown. It emphasized her bright and pale complexion and rendered it almost translucent. She looked like a brook after a rain, refreshing and wonderful. Her gorgeous and thin legs were also exposed. On the whole, she appeared sensual and lovely with a touch of cuteness. The salesperson grinned as she added, "This piece is perfect for you, madam. You look fantastic in it." Lisa was ashamed by the praise. James glanced on. It was evident that she looked wonderful in the clothing. Although she generally looked messy and uncultured, she today appeared graceful and was full of feminine charm. He could not help but take 2 more glances. When he noticed Lisa turn her head, he hurriedly shifted his attention elsewhere. James was incredibly satisfied. He gestured for someone to foot the payment and stated to the salesperson, "Wrap up everything in the store that suits her and send it to the estate." Lisa was shocked. She glanced at James with light pouring from her eyes. He was too rich. Naturally, the seller was immensely happy. She politely walked them out the door and watched with jealousy as Lisa rushed up to the exquisite Porsche outside and clambered into the car. Soon they arrived at the company. She thanked him before getting out of the car swiftly. Emily brought Lisa to the enormous hall of a 7-star hotel where auditions were taking place. While strolling, she said harshly, "There's a role for you to try out today. If you run off halfway as you did the last time, don't ever come to the firm again. You think you're Olivia? If you want to pick and choose your roles, then be like her. Even if she's not crazily famous, at least she's a significant celebrity. Otherwise, you must take your auditions seriously and quit coming up with stupid ideas." Lisa thought to herself. Olivia had the complete financial support of the Carter family, therefore, of course, she was famous. On the other side, her stepmother had gone to extraordinary efforts to limit her development. Also, Olivia interfered any time she gained a role. Yet she could not give up because of them. To do so would be the same as retiring before the conflict had begun. "Audition for the role properly today," Emily continued. "The investor this time is very rich. He's from the Jameson family, a well-known and intriguing family. No one knows how rich or powerful they are. Even if you fail the audition, you'll surely make substantial advancements in your profession if he develops a liking to you." Lisa was no longer listening. Her attention had totally gone to Olivia and Ryan, who were moving toward her. Olivia was slim and graceful, while Ryan was tall and handsome. When the two of them strolled side by side, all eyes turned towards them. "Wow, Olivia. That's probably her fiancé beside her. I heard that they're getting engaged soon. His family is pretty rich, and he's a second-generation heir. Her fiancé is really handsome. They're a perfect match. Olivia is really lucky." Before Lisa could turn around and leave, she heard Ryan shout out, "Lisa, why are you here?" Lisa froze and looked back reluctantly. She observed Olivia glance at her distastefully as they headed toward her. Lisa smiled weakly at Ryan. "I came for an audition." Ryan stared at her clothes. He seemed to be thinking that she was different from her typical carefree and boisterous demeanor. She looked much more rested, and even gave off a feminine charisma. "Where did you go? Your family has been seeking for you." Ryan was still oblivious of the situation. He only knew that the Carter household was in ruin. Hannah was always cursing Lisa. calling her an ungrateful wretch and a total ingrate. Lisa chuckled angrily and glanced at Olivia's insolent grin. I'm fine. I'll be staying with a friend in the future. I won't be going back to the Carter residence. Olivia complained to Ryan. Ryan, you have no idea how anxious the family is. She's too insensible. My mother stayed awake all night out of worry, but she... Lisa snorted. Her stepmother was probably unable to sleep out of frustration at having failed to sell her off. Lisa did not want to see her perform any longer. She said coldly, I still have an audition. Ryan, you guys go ahead. Staring wistfully at Ryan, she gripped her fist hard. Suddenly, yells of exclamation arose from behind them. They looked back in surprise, only to see a tidy row of the best bodyguards create a route to show James behind them. He was clothed in complete black like a knight of the dark night, mysterious and aloof. Lisa was stupefied. Seeing him here, she felt like she was dreaming. Olivia's dazzling eyes were already pulled to him. She watched the tall and beautiful man stroll past her without so much as a side glance. With his arrogant posture, an icy brow, he seemed like a towering king who did not allow anyone to go close to him. Ryan, who's that? He looks really familiar, she asked Ryan, unable to hide her curiosity. On the other hand, Lisa longed to bury herself in the soil as she noticed James firing a glance at her. Olivia's exclamation immediately jolted her out of her daze. She noticed Olivia lower her head and murmur, Is he looking at me? Lisa could not stand to be there any longer. While the place was in turmoil, she fled out. After some minutes, she suddenly heard Olivia's voice from behind her. Lisa, it would be best if you go home. Lisa turned her head and responded coldly. I'm never going back, Olivia sneered. Don't think that I don't know about your motives towards Ryan. You're not good enough for him. He's about to get engaged to me soon and become your brother-in-law. If you're human, stop trying to flirt with him. Look at your predicament. You're an illegitimate daughter, yet you still dare to entertain silly illusions about a rich young master like Ryan. Lisa's emotions writhed when Olivia stared at her smugly. At first, you still had a chance to squeeze into the upper ranks of society by becoming the young madam of the Foster family. It's a pity that you weren't tactful. What? You felt that you may have a shot with Ryan? If you're done, can I leave now? If it was anyone else, she would have been okay. But she could not tolerate it when Ryan was mentioned. Lisa took large leaps for the exit but was jerked back roughly by Olivia. What kind of attitude are you showing me? Olivia sneered and continued. If you turn around now and kiss the dirt off my shoes, I might let you have this part. Otherwise, as long as I'm around, don't even think about being engaged in any important productions. Chapter 9. Madam is auditioning for a role flabbergasted. Lisa glanced at Olivia. Who do you think you are? Just when Olivia was preparing to beat Lisa to make her know who she truly was, her demeanor suddenly shifted. A slight fear suddenly surfaced on her exquisite face as she added gently, Anyway, you must come home soon. Lisa, I'm eventually your older sister, and I hope you'll live well. Lisa glanced with wonder at her sudden shift in attitude and turned around. She did not know when James's distant and silent presence had emerged behind her. At first, Olivia glanced toward this man with starry-eyed adoration. Looking at his wonderfully chiseled face, she squeezed her breasts together as forcefully as she could. Fortunately, she had just gone for some therapy and was looking her best at this moment. She had initially assumed that Ryan was already ideal. He was immensely affluent and gorgeous. However, in front of this man, he would definitely feel humiliated of his inferiority. It was clear from his extraordinary aura that he was not merely any normal man. Olivia was going to lose her wits from staring at the face that could make any woman shy. However, James only glanced at Olivia calmly before concentrating his eyes on Lisa's troubled face. She appeared as white as a ghost, a far cry from her warm and beautiful complexion this morning. Her long eyelashes were twitching slightly, and her lower lids were tinged with a greenish-blue tone. She looked like a puppy that had just been abandoned. Are you feeling unwell? James asked, his face expressionless. Lisa shuddered. She raised her head with effort and said, No, I'm fine. Come with me. He did not spare Olivia a more glance. Instead, he marched straight ahead with long strides. Lisa froze momentarily. She stared at Olivia's twisted face beside her. From behind him, James's assistant, Ethan, peered closely at her, indicating for her to go after him. Without much of an option, Lisa rushed after him. She left behind a pale-faced Olivia who stood there and exclaimed in wonder, "Lisa knows him? That's impossible. Lisa is nothing. She can't even be dubbed a D-list celebrity." But who exactly is this man? He has a great look about him. Olivia was a connoisseur. She knew that the handcrafted Italian suit the man was wearing was not something just everyone could buy. That designer brand was excessively pricey. Ryan had meant to get it, but neglected to arrange a suit for the engagement ceremony. Olivia could not help but feel a little jealous. She glanced at Lisa's receding back with contempt. Lisa followed James toward the exit. "Thanks for your help earlier," she added to James. James did not move his head but glanced at her obliquely. "What are you doing here?" Lisa stated. "Oh, there's a role that I wanted to audition for, so I came to meet the director with the hope that I could get a chance to audition." James replied with a "oh," and studied her azure green outfit. She looked lovely and eye-catching. "Okay, look for me here after you're done. I'll take you home." Lisa nodded. "Okay, but why are you here?" "This hotel is owned by my family," he said monotonously. "So that's why," Lisa thought in surprise, "a hotel this big?" Lisa said goodbye and left to tackle her concerns. Watching her leave, James rushed to his side and questioned his assistant, Ethan. "She's here for an audition?" Looking at the direction Lisa went, Ethan said respectfully, "Yes, madam. Is auditioning for a role in a fantasy production that your family is investing in to market our hotels. Filming will begin soon, and Nathan is the male lead." James's eyes strayed to the door where Lisa had exited. He dropped his head and mumbled to Ethan, "Go out and make some arrangements." Chapter 10. "So this is the type of woman he likes," Lisa said. "But whether or not you have money is none of my business since we'll be getting a divorce anyway." James laughed. "It's good that you are aware of that." Lisa got into his car. She glanced at his faultless side profile and appreciated the exquisite angle of his jaw. From the side, he seemed like a flawless sculpture. The more she looked, the more she began to fall into a fog. James took a glance and happened to see her legs spreading wide apart, slightly exposing her white safety trousers. Its outline was clear to the eye, his brows furrowed. "Can you sit more properly like a woman?" Lisa stiffened. She lowered her head and gazed at her dress before hurriedly sealing her legs. Seriously, how could she have forgotten that she was wearing a dress? Lifting her head, her eyes met James's disapproving ones. She observed in a nonplussed manner, "As if you've never seen it before." James's face darkened. "Can you bear some semblance of a woman? Will you not divorce me if I bear some semblance of a woman?" She reacted angrily, left James dumbfounded. This was the first time a lady ventured to yell at him. He was briefly unable to adapt. "Miss Lisa, I just hope that our marriage will be more comfortable for the both of us. Shouldn't you carry some responsibility for this too? After all, this entire thing started because of you." "Ha! You're speaking as if I forced you to pull my clothes off that night. The only thing I did was make you hard." "I didn't force. You stripped the garments off me." James's expression appeared even more peaceful. "But I remember that you enjoyed it greatly. You also hugged me and wouldn't let go till the finale. I even remember that you adored biting your fingers when you were excited. Your face also grew so crimson that it appeared like blood could pour out of it." Lisa's face immediately reddened. Under his steady attention, the heat in her face made her feel like she was burning. I don't remember at all. It must be your imagination. I certainly recall it being incredibly uncomfortable. Because it was your first time. You knew nothing. And you weren't gentle at all." All of a sudden, his face got close and appeared straight before her. As he glanced at her scorched face, he felt that she was delicate like this, her feminine charm oozing off her gently. There was a sense of malice in his deep and dark eyes. Lisa quickly leaned back as she saw his look that was so deep it was like an abyss. The narrower gap led the air in the entire automobile to quickly heat up. It felt as if something abnormal was festering. The warmth of his body extended towards her and made her bones echo at the apparition of a true guy. See, just like this. He grinned as he stared at the color of her face. Do you want me to take a picture and show you? Lisa smacked his hand away and sat back in her seat. They each gazed out the window like nothing transpired. However, the heat in the automobile was still perceptible and continued to increase slowly in intensity. Lisa's cheeks was heating to the level that she did not dare turn to look at the man beside her. How could she forget? That was her first time, but she had given it away so carelessly and had been punished so badly. With her hand on her face, she thought despondently, was her face truly so red? Then the chauffeur disrupted the tense air between the two persons. Sir, madam, we have arrived. Lisa opened the automobile door in a rush. However, her arm was swiftly yanked back by the man behind her. She looked back and said, What are you doing? James responded, chuckling. Why are you running away? Could it be because you're shy? Leave me alone. Lisa slapped his hand away and walked quickly into the house. As he gazed at her receding figure, James shook his head. James got out from the automobile gently and leisurely. He was in a pleasant mood as he watched Lisa flee for her life. Lisa had just walked a few steps when she saw an unfamiliar woman standing by the door. She was a stunning beauty, and instantly brought to mind the four terms, well-bred young lady. Lisa froze. Behind her, James paused in his tracks and stared at the woman. He called out in a slightly hoarse voice, Emily. Emily was his girlfriend. Once she saw the woman, Lisa appeared to comprehend what type of women James genuinely appreciated. With her long hair blowing in the breeze, her brilliant and charming features made her look just like a well-bred young lady from afar. She was clad in a white fitted jacket. Underneath that was a gray dress. She seemed brilliant, educated, graceful, and generous. It was apparent with one look that she was a fair and wealthy beauty through and through. Lisa hesitated momentarily, afraid about what she should do. She could only look at them in a stupor, realizing that she certainly looked quite foolish herself. With James standing by her, they seemed like a fantastic match. She was obviously a stylish and fashionable woman. Naturally, she was not as naive as Lisa. If James stood there with her, they would certainly be the golden couple in everyone's eyes. They would be the topic of everyone's jealousy. When she turned around and recognized Lisa, her exquisite chin raised slightly, and she gazed at Lisa with an arrogant smile. After looking at Lisa for lengthy time, she then turned her sight to rest on James. Upon recognizing the loaded circumstance, Lisa could only glance at James momentarily and replied, reasonably, Oh, my clothes haven't been washed. I'll go wash them now. She then raced into the house fast. James's face pinched as he watched her race away humiliated. He turned his head to glance at Emily. Emily snorted. She pointed to Lisa as she shouted, What kind of woman did you bring home? James said. Did you read the email that I sent you? I can't help that things have already proceeded to this stage. I know that you'll be angry and sad, but all of this has become a reality. I didn't have a choice. This was a marriage that I had to accept. Because my family thinks that she can make my illness better, they wanted me to marry her. I could only agree to it. I know that it could be very tough for you to accept it now because I just informed you, but this is the reality. If you leave me because of this, I will accept it. Hate me, criticize me, beg me for retribution, I will accept all of it. I breached our deal, thus I'll accept anything you want me to do. Emily's shoulders were trembling. I don't want to hit you. How could I bear to? But I just want to ask you, what am I going to do? In actual fact, we're just strangers who've only known each other for a few days. Before the marriage, I didn't even know her name. My relatives forced me to marry her. I really had no option. When there's an opportunity in the future, I'll divorce her. At this, Emily lifted her head and glanced at him, her eyes shining, with tears. Really? James nodded. Both of us agreed upon this from the start. James and Emily were childhood sweethearts. It was only because he suddenly grew unwell and could no longer touch ladies that they could not be together. The James family wanted him to locate a lady who could born him children, but anytime Emily was around him, he would suffer rashes and his sickness would worsen. Emily had tried everything strategies from avoiding wearing cosmetics to taking meds. However, nasty sores would still emerge across his body.